Okay, I am going to share with you about the article I read. It's all about Solomon Straub, a self-made music educator on the prairie, and I think the prairie part of it was a little misleading in that um, it's more it's more about him being in the Midwest. So if you guys that are on the east or west think of that as the prairie, then that's just fine. So, but William or Solomon Straub was an influential figure in American music, especially in the Midwest. But he's not very well known. And what the author of this, Philip Hash, the author of the article, was trying to make the point that there's great value in us learning about what these educators, these music educators, have done along the way that have brought us to where we are now. And I think in a lot of things we see in education, we still have a lot of the same ideas that they had because they work and they're good ideas. Of course, some things along the way. One of the things that maybe not isn't in this presentation, but I mentioned real quick is one of the things that Straub did was in his publishing part. Sorry, we're not even to that. I'm getting out of order, but I'm excited. He changed the order of choral presentation. It used to be tenor, alto, soprano, bass, and then he started moving that to soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and it was a movement amongst all publishers and composers to move the voicing. So sopranos had the melody. Of course, they didn't think that was a great idea back in the olden days, but anyway. He was born in Indiana. He was German heritage, and they farmed. And his parents were really devout religious people. And Solomon was very, very active in his church all through his life, really, in all these things, singing solos, directing choirs, writing hymns, etc. His early career, he did teaching in Dowjack and Lansing, Michigan. These are places where his brother was a pastor in the Universalist church, and so he moved kind of there to work in that church and with his brother. He attended George Root's Normal Music Institute, and he eventually started having his own normal musical institutes all around the Midwest. But he was really well noted because he was actually a featured soloist. Solomon was in like the 1873 Institute. So he was well respected by other musicians and music educators. He moved to Chicago in 1873 and established himself teacher, conductor, composer, and also really as a publisher of music. He started his firm in 1879. And he launched the publishing of the Song Friend, which is a musical periodical that the people could subscribe to for $1 a year, or they could get one copy for 10 cents, something to that effect. His sisters were involved with him, as well as his son Arthur, who were all part of editing, and they were all musicians. He organized and led these singing conventions all over the Midwest. And then also these normal musical institutes and Chautauqua choirs, it's basically a community choir that's more involved with the church in general, but there's still Chautauqua choirs around. There's one just south of me here in Burlington, Iowa. It's more of a children's choir, but it's Chautauqua. It's just a community choir. And he did a lot of that. He would go and start and do Chautauqua choirs all around the Midwest. He also did one of his normal teaching institutes in Sacramento, so he went far away, but mostly you'll just see him in all sorts of smaller cities around the Midwest. And he was innovative. Sorry about that. He distributed his education materials. He published a lot of his own compositions as well as others in his books. His sisters are Maria and Mary Ann, and these are some of the things that they worked together with him. And then his son Arthur was also a composer, a really accomplished piano player, and he went on to take over his father's business after he died, but also a teacher. And then he kind of had this professional network. He was locked in with all these people. Philip Bliss was even one of the names that came up, but he published some of his music and put it in some of his hymn books and also educational books. He published the work of respected musicians and all sorts of collaborations. So he had quite a professional network. And his approach was really built on Mason's established methods, which were Pestalozzian mostly, and wrote before note things that we've talked about and discussed. And he was very forward-thinking. He foreshadowed some of the things that even modern pedagogists would talk about and be presenting then shortly thereafter. Had quite an impact in the Midwest for 3 decades. Promoted modern teaching methods. He was very influential. So all these normal musical institutes that he did were very influential on music teachers all over the Midwest and beyond. So he has a legacy with that. And you just he's not on the list of these famous music educators or musicians or composers, but he's somebody who made a real impact in music education and furthering some of the methods that Lowell Mason and Root and those people were putting forth. So he was quite a significant person, and I think it's valuable for us to understand and know more about what these other characters were doing in music education. I'm sorry this is way too long. Well, that's okay. Also, one of the things here that I realized that I had put forth to do a historical research project, and Dr. Meyer said, no, don't do that. That's way too much. Take too long and all that. Well, in this paper, he cited over 150 sources. And so I'm like, okay, thanks, Dr. Myers. So there's a lot of work involved in these historical research papers. So anyway, I'm sure that is all I have about Straub, Solomon Straub, and his significance and contributions to music education.